Welcome. I'm Cavan Scott, one of the story architects of Star Wars: The High Republic.
This is Dominic Pace, who plays Gekko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian.
Hi, I'm Claudia Gray. I write Star Wars books.
And you're listening.
And you are listening
to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Here we go. I am joined by two amazing people to talk about the fourth episode / part of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So this is the third edition of the discussion show, and trying to have different guests each time. And I've got another couple of guests who all of you already love, I know it. So let's introduce them. First of all, we have got the pop gorilla himself, JAC. Please introduce yourself, say hello.
Hello. Well, or I should say, hello there.
That was a good opening.
I like the fact you called this part, because this show that doesn't feel, maybe this episode is the first time, hasn't felt episodic to me. It's felt like parts of a whole.
Yeah.
So I think your self-correction, well, that's not the right phrase, but like, you described it as episodic and then you said part. I think that perfectly fits the show that we've seen so far up until now.
Yeah.
Great to be here, Mike. So thanks for having me on.
No worries at all. It's delightful. And the other individual who's coming on the show is someone who is actually podcasting more than anyone in the podcasting sphere at the moment. And at the moment, she doesn't even have an active podcast. This is Miss Tonya Todd, appearing on every show under the sun. Thank you for coming on, Tonya. As always, it's a delight to talk to you.
He stole hello there, so I'll say meow there.
Nice. Very, very nice. So I want to ask you both, I'll start with Tonya, up to this episode so far, so the first 3 episodes, how did you feel about Kenobi? What do you think of obviously the first 2 basically came as one, and then the 3rd episode. So before this episode, how were you kind of feeling it? How do you think about it?
I was enjoying it. It looks great. I mean, there's always going to be a few things, but overall, I didn't enjoy being on Tatooine because I hate sand, but I'm from Vegas, so I legitimately don't want to be on a desert planet. And then you get to see Leia in her environment. It's like, yeah, that would be my life. I want to be the princess, and he can have his sand castles. It's really not fair when you think about it. The separation that they went through. I know you were mentioning on your first, or no, it was your second episode, I think, that she would have been the badass. Like, I think she already was the badass. She didn't even have the training, and she carried herself with more poise and power than most of the adults in this world.
Yeah, we know who it is, and I realize this only now as you're speaking. It's Rey. Rey literally is that. Not in a sense of her character lives up to what Leia is. I do not believe she does. Leia is my favourite female character in anything, and I actually like her more in the sequel trilogy than any time, to be honest with you. I think she's amazing in that. But with the characters and things, I've forgotten what I was going to say about Rey. The thing is, Rey is basically just Luke, because Luke was originally going to be a female, and then George Lucas decided to make him male. And I think Rey is just that kind of attempt of going, let's just basically someone, a scavenger, poor, by themselves, isolated in some way, by themselves on a sand planet. And it's like, and they have force powers. It's like, okay. That's broad strokes, that is very similar to Luke.
So to answer your question, enjoying the series, absolutely loved the 3rd episode. I was disappointed by this one.
Yeah, I think I would agree to a degree. I would say disappointment is kind of like, can Star Wars ever disappoint me? It hasn't quite. Boba Fett, I had kind of lowish expectations, so I don't know. What about you, Jack? What do you think of the first few episodes?
I really enjoyed them. I was behind. I had not had time to watch them. I'd just had a busy couple of weeks, and I was sort of had some things that I had to watch often for other podcasts like stacked up behind me. So this couple of days ago, or like nearly a week ago now, I suppose, last Saturday, I just hammered all 3 in an evening with my partner. Yeah, with my partner Emma. We were like, I said to her, like, well, I've got to watch them soon because I'm recording this week. So we put the first one on, and she was like, oh, I could watch the second one. And then it was like 10 o'clock in the evening or something. She was like, wow, we could just watch the 3rd one.
Oh,
so we just did them all through. And it did feel like watching like a little mini movie. I have to say, obviously we had that particular experience of watching it in that way, but those 3 just completely flowed on from one another. Didn't feel like natural breaks. You could have almost just taken out the credits, I think, and just had them back to back. Yeah, I agree with Tonya. I think it's a really strong start. I enjoyed the Tatooine stuff and hearing you guys talk about it, just because I liked seeing Ewan McGregor back in that role and being melancholic and being you could see how much was going on behind a very stoic facade. You can see all the thought process and the emotion that his character is going through. I think he has been absolutely unbelievably good in this series so far. And then equally, I was pleased to get off planet because, we spent a lot of time there recently between Boba Fett and Mandalorian.
Many Mandalorian episodes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was nice to go somewhere else. And I did not expect what the catch of this series would be at all. I had no suspicions. I couldn't have predicted it. And it was a good hook. It got me immediately.
Yeah, I completely agree. I said to Megan when it happened after we watched the first episode or two, because we watched them like one sitting, I was like, of all the reasons to get Kenobi to leave Tatooine, of all of them possible, that is such a well thought out, really obvious one. I'd not heard anyone on the internet. Maybe there is a couple of people on forums or something, but of the circles I was in, no one I knew even hinted at young Leia. I didn't even hear a whisper. So when it happened, I was like,
that is
genius.
Saying something because it's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess because most of the promos just showed Tatooine, didn't it? We all presumed it was going to be about Luke, right? I mean, you got to give it to Disney. Something they're really good at. I think generally more for Marvel than they are for Star Wars is misdirection in their promotion. I know, Tonya, you tend to avoid almost everything.
Right. I haven't seen any of the trailers.
But even if you do see them, they're really clever at how people have started to cotton onto it now. Like, I won't say anything just in case, but like people have started to spot when there's gaps in the screen and things like that. But I think they're really good at that kind of misdirection. It all started with Infinity War, didn't it? Where they kind of threw us all off the scent with that one.
That's why I like the trailers after I watched the movie or the series. So because there's an art to making a really good trailer. And I want to see this piece of art after the spoilers are removed. And I can say, oh, I'm so glad I did not watch this one before. Or I can say, man, that would have been amazing. It wouldn't have spoiled anything. They did a really nice job making this interesting without giving anything away.
I like you do it in reverse. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then you get the misleading trailers. Like the episode 1 trailer is one of the best trailers ever.
And poster.
It's an amazing trailer. And then you watch the movie, and if you're not Mike, you're like, what did they do?
I grew up with it, so I was 5 when it came out. So I was just like, oh, this is interesting. The thing is, I've always said, like, I think The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars film, excluding the Clone Wars animated movie. It is worse than Rise of Skywalker, I think, in almost every way. It's just that the ways in which it's worse, I can deal with. That's the kind of thing. I was like, the lore and the world building's great, and the characters, for the most part, are actually interesting with like Qui-Gon, the new edition, and these certain elements. But then you've got other parts where you've got boring political stuff and Jar Jar and etc. And it's like, the acting's a bit jarring. But for me, acting in Star Wars has never been an issue for anyone because I've never not felt a part of it. Even when, Hayden Christensen's interpretations, shall we say, in Attack of the Clones when he's acting and things like that, I never thought they were bad. I still don't necessarily. I'm just like, hey, he's an awkward kid.
Either. He was a 19-year-old boy having feelings. He's going to act like that. And he was very emotional because that's how a 19-year-old in that situation would be. He wasn't Darth Vader yet.
And how surprised were you, Tonya? Because where you hadn't seen any trailers or anything when Darth Vader showed up, you must have been completely blown away, or did you have some suspicions? Oh, wait, no. Megan ruined it, didn't she?
She did.
I realised I'm just throwing her in the deep end. I realised after asking that question, I was like,
she's not here to defend herself tonight either. Oh dear.
I was going to say someone in our group already mentioned it, but you go ahead and throw her under the bus because
she didn't mean to be fair. It was, I can't remember what the context was.
I'm sure in your household it seems like just common knowledge.
Yeah, well, the problem is that obviously you didn't pay attention to any of the promo. Literally, it was everywhere. I don't know how you would have not found out somehow if it wasn't us, because every poster, the IMDb thing, everything's got Christensen. I think IMDb has it now, but it all had Christensen.
IMDb pages, because I don't want to see that stuff. I will go there after the fact.
Yeah. But even like if you're on IMDb looking up a film, there's a trailer for Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor talking about Star Wars. And it's like, well, they're not going to randomly bring Hayden Christensen and have him talking with Ewan McGregor.
I think it is? I know where the advertisements are on the page, so I just don't look there. If I'm going to IMDb, I'm looking for the search bar or I'm looking at the birthdays, and I ignore all of the advertisements.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I do enjoy I do try and avoid trailers. If there's a film I haven't seen, I watch a trailer. I'm like, right, that's convinced me to watch it. Now I'm not going to watch anything else on it. It's only with Star Wars I'll watch the teaser and then the main trailer. I won't watch TV spots and behind the scenes stuff, anything like that until I've seen the content. I'm just like, teaser, because in my the way I've now done with social media algorithms, everything to do with Star Wars constantly comes up all the time. And if I don't watch a trailer as soon as it comes out, I'm going to find out the content of the trailer in weird, janky orders about things, and it's just not going to work. But yeah, so with this episode, I think the general consensus is that this is the weakest one. And linking with what Jack said about feeling like a film, I would like them to actually have an option when you finish this to be able to go play or as Kenobi movie as an example and just be able to have it all the way through, because and they wouldn't do that, I don't think. But the problem is with this episode I found is there's one or two moments which we'll talk about which I think are actually quite silly and do kind of bring you out a bit, especially when you think about it. But it's not that this episode for me was actively bad. It was just, this is all right. But in a film, if this was a part of the film, this is like before the big climax. So this is always the bit where you're like, it's kind of boring, but I can feel something brewing. Whereas with all of us, it's a weekly thing. So it's like, oh, that wasn't that interesting. Wait 1 week. And for a lot of it, for me, it's like anticipation. And for a lot of people, I think it is, it's exciting to wait and be with kind of everyone, most people in the community of Star Wars, to be able to kind of take this ride with people. Whereas the movie, it's like, either you've seen all of it or you've seen none of it. So I think this has a weird entry to it.
I understand that, but as a writer, in my mind, there should be an arc within each episode. There needs to be a beginning, middle, and end of every episode. It should not feel like, well, don't worry, it'll get better in the next show, because they need to grab your attention enough that you want to go with them to the next episode. And this one just kind of flatlined.
What do you think, Jack?
And it's too long a period to flatline.
Yeah.
I think I'm generally more positive than most other people I seem to have seen out on the internet. Like Andy from our community seems to be quite down on this episode, and doing some research and to prep for tonight, there seems to be quite a few really strong negative reviews out there, like 1 star, like really.
Oh, really? I mean, I didn't hate it. Saying of the 4, it was my least favorite, and it feels like a letdown after such an amazing episode.
Which is so often the case, isn't it? Unfortunately. I think there is a bit
There were some dumb moments, though, don't you think, that they didn't have in the previous episodes? Just some, like, we're really going to have him walking out with a child under a coat. We're doing this. This feels like BoJack Horseman level silly.
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, you're right. There's some nitty gritty zoom in stuff we can real pick out, I think, in this episode. I think when I'm first watching something, I tend to not notice that stuff. I tend to be drawn in and I let it go by. And that's a way that I've had to train myself, really, after years of sort of studying films and then doing film reviews. And I think I was quite picky for a long time, and I've had to retrain myself just to go with the story. And then, as you said, Mike, you start thinking about it and you go, that was never going to work, as you said, Tonya. Or it's like when, you're seeing films, like The Hobbits or something, they all stand on each other's shoulders to make themselves look like a normal-sized human. It was that kind of silliness, wasn't it? But I think, broadly speaking...
And maybe it's because the last 3 episodes I'm watching for fun, and this one, I know I'm going to have to talk about it, so maybe I'm watching it more closely than I would have.
I feel that way about when I watch these series for shows now. It's a lot of the time I don't watch it twice. If I had unlimited time, and if this was my job instead of it being my hobby, I would watch the episode probably like with Megan potentially, or even by myself, and just have fun. And then when I watch it the second time, I make all the notes. But I kind of have to make notes while I'm doing it as well.
That's what I did when we did Loki, because it's like, all right, I need to watch this for me. I need to enjoy this and watch it for myself, and then I will watch it for Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this hits the brakes, isn't it, after episode 3? I mean, for obvious reasons, Obi-Wan is injured and needs to go and have the old Star Wars classic back to tank. Cannot avoid a back to tank anymore, can we? My God.
Go to the High Republic, we're getting there. We're going back slowly. High Republic's where they introduced it. So 150 years before the new phase, they're doing this other stuff that's kind of old. So as we slowly go back in the timeline, back to only a few hundred years before Skywalker Saga. So slowly, but in film or on the screen, we're not going to get there for maybe a decade, I'd say, to be fair.
I mean, I'm being critical as well. I'd rather a back to tank than a force heal, if I'm honest.
Yeah. 100%. Especially the timing of the force heals. I'm just like, after all this time, either keep them in, either have them in, or have better explanation. Anyway, sorry, Jack. But yeah, you said about the back to tank. And with the pacing and things, like, when you first watched it, so it was, how do you feel like about the pacing of the episode specifically? Did you just like it, or?
It's brisk, isn't it? And it kind of flies by. And I think it's just the trouble. I agree with everything that everyone said. It is a bit throwaway. It is that lull before we know we're going to get to the 2 final episodes. It's just a homage episode, isn't it? They're calling these like episodes Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4. This is episode 4, right? And it is literally episode 4. It's Princess Leia's been captured. She needs to be rescued. Obi-Wan is called upon.
And episode 3 was lava burning and that sort of thing. Like,
yes.
Oh my god, I didn't even notice that.
So make of that what you will, really. I mean, some people will be happy to see all these kind of nostalgic nods, and I guess to an extent maybe not done as well as it has been done previously. I think I agree with you, Mike. There was some really nice touches within this, particularly to do with Obi-Wan regaining his use of the Force and looking really cool with that in the dark with the glowing blue lightsaber. Yeah, I think it's fine.
I was thinking, even as Leia, knowing that he's probably coming to save her, being stuck on that thing and the lights going out like that would be terrifying. It would be terrifying as an adult. Can you imagine as a little kid?
Yeah. I suppose, though, after all that time of being scared, you kind of... She also, let's play the card, she is Force sensitive. She doesn't know it yet, but she could probably sense... Once Obi-Wan's in the room, she can probably kind of tell. And I like to think the way she has the Force is she just has like intuition that no one else really has. But
she doesn't understand that that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Not like I can lift that with my mind, but more so I know what to do in the right situations. I can feel, I can sense where I'm going. And I want to say, even in this episode, I enjoyed this episode, to clarify. I thought it was really good for the most part. There's just a couple of, I would describe them as like prequel-esque blips, where it's just a bit like, not quite Jar Jar level, but more just a smidge, maybe sequel level more so. Where it's just a little bit. In the thing, I was like, this is amazing. The coat bit, I was like, yeah, whatever, this is fine. Finished the episode, I was like, I really enjoyed that. And then I was looking at my notes more so, and I was like, okay, well, that coat bit was quite stupid. Of all the plot things, it's things like that which I feel, but I think young Leia, I said it in the last few episodes, I think she's absolutely incredible. I even when she looks at the screen and she's doing just face expressions, I'm like, I can't see you as anything but Leia. You are doing almost a better job at Leia from episode 4 than Carrie Fisher was of herself in the sequels, if you know what I mean. Like, I know that wasn't the point of the character, but she seems closer to that than Carrie Fisher is in the sequels to the original.
You made a comment on one of your previous shows about how if you hadn't seen the Star Wars movies and you watch this and then you get to A New Hope, you know, without a word being said, that's that little girl.
Yes.
You can just tell in her demeanor, in the way she carries herself, in her confidence. They did a nice job of finding someone who could portray that personality. And that's not, she's a tiny person, but she had a huge personality. Yeah.
Playing someone like Leia is a lot more complicated than I think people give credit for. Especially a young Leia, you have to be intelligent, but not over intelligent for, say, a 10-year-old. A really smart 10-year-old is almost like an intelligent 15-year-old for the most part. That's kind of how it is. You couldn't be wise like a 40-year-old in the same way. She couldn't be the way she was in the sequels. You have to have it balancing. You have to have the elements of the character, but certain parts drawn back. Impulse control, certain other things. When you're a kid, you don't know as many. But it is so intricately done, I think, with her. You can very easily see almost like a prism of light. You just immediately see the streak of how it goes exactly to Carrie Fisher in A New Hope. And I completely agree. I think I
feel like they had a missed opportunity, though, don't you? Because she is Force sensitive and she doesn't know it. And you could see the battle between the two females who, they've both been, well, I guess only one was an actual youngling Jedi, but they both have similar backgrounds in that they were Force sensitive as children, and she's trying to get something out of Leia. It would have been really cool if Leia got something out of her.
And like the Rey, Kylo Ren from Force Awakens style.
So that we could have gotten a little bit more about her backstory. It's like they started off alluding to things and then they decided to drop it for this episode.
I think it's going to be the next episode. I think the next episode is going to start with a Reva flashback, and then she's going to do something major, probably die. That's
I've got my prediction for Raven when you want it later.
Okay, well, we're kind of jumping about here. This episode isn't following. We're normally I vaguely do the narrative, but we've spoken about the trailers and all kinds of other stuff. So if you want to give Reva predictions, you can go ahead if you want to.
It was this episode really when it came to me, because everyone's been thinking about, and I like that link of like she was one of the younglings we see fleeing from the Jedi Temple. That makes total sense. But this obsession she has, and I know like up until this point we were thinking it was to get close to Vader. Is she actually going to try and take him out? I think that Obi-Wan is the Jedi who recruited her and brought her to the Jedi Temple, because she keeps saying things like, we're taken away from our families, we're given no choice. So I'm wondering why her obsession with Obi-Wan is that he took her to the temple, and then of course that set her off on this path of disaster through no fault of his own after this point. So I just wonder if he's the Jedi who found her maybe and brought her in.
That's a very good idea.
And that she could feel like he abandoned her in their moment of crisis.
Yeah, and because he trained Anakin as well. People probably knew that when Anakin came in. They knew. Right. So it's like, you not only brought me into this situation, but you're the cause of Vader. You did all this. That if that was the flashback we got, that would be, I'd love that. Now you're going to make me sad if it's not that. It has to be something even better. Yeah.
I went back and watched the first episode, just that area, because I wanted to see, did we start on her? I remember there being a little black girl, but I didn't remember how they presented the characters to us. And yeah, they focus on her and then they pan out.
Yeah. She's center pretty much the whole time, isn't she? Very much. Yeah. Yeah, and I've had a lot of people online complaining about Moses Ingram's acting, and I really don't think it's that bad. I mean, I rarely think acting in Star Wars is bad at all, but when I watch the first few episodes before, normally when I record these episodes, I don't look online, I don't listen to any of my friends, like Ben of Star Wars Timeline, he often does a review episode in the morning and things, and I don't listen to anyone's opinions. I watch the episode, and then I record this, and I don't want anyone else's opinions kind of tainting what I purely think after watching the episode, like unfiltered, of just my own thoughts without outside intervention, and this is my way of getting other people's thoughts and things. But I saw so many people after the second episode dropped and the third episode being like, oh yeah, Moses Ingram's the worst, and obviously there's some horrendous stuff that happened to her. She got harassed online, which I said in I think my last episode, it was absolutely horrendous, and anyone who does that isn't a true Star Wars fan, that sort of thing. But I really didn't get, when I watched it, I wasn't like, oh yeah, she's a bad actor. I was like, yeah, she's playing an Inquisitor called Reva. She's off the rails, got bits of Kylo Ren sort of esque in her, trying to be kind of like Vader. I get the character completely. She makes 100% perfect sense to me. Not brought out at all by any of Moses Ingram's acting. I thought it was genuinely really good. I know a lot of it is misogynistic people and people who are actually racist and that kind of horrible thing, but I think there's a higher portion of the fandom that hates her acting that I would not expect them to be.
If they have not seen her in anything else, so that they think that because she is so stoic, that's bad acting. But because I've seen her elsewhere, that's not how she usually behaves. This is acting. She's doing a great job of being this character where I almost didn't recognize her at first. In fact, I did not recognize her at first. And then when I realized, like, oh, I've totally seen her. She's just so different that I didn't see that character in this, because she's playing someone different. Her acting is good here.
Yeah. What do you think about her as a character and an actor, Jack?
I'm finding the character really interesting. If I'm honest, I do think she's the weakest link in the cast. I don't think she's bad per se, but I think as we're having this conversation, I think if we're going to pinpoint, we look at Vivian Blair as young Leia, astonishing. We look at McGregor, some of the best work he's ever done, and we're talking about Ewan McGregor here. The actress playing Tarla,
Indira Varma.
Thank you. I mean, she's been brilliant in these last couple of episodes, and I love this idea that you can see this character's influence upon some of Leia's traits later on as well, the ballsiness and the swagger and the confidence to be surrounded by enemies. And I know Leia already has that to an extent, but this woman clearly must be an influence on Leia too.
I thought that when I first met her, because I thought, oh, this is where she gets her vague British accent. So I don't know if you remember Carrie Fisher has just like this slightly British accent for some of the things she says. Her character isn't British. It just didn't make any sense. Now we know why.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, as Mike said, Alderaanian. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm not here to criticize her. I think she's perfectly fine. But I think when you stack her up next to everyone else, maybe that's where it's coming from, that
I
she's
see.
just not quite as good.
I see what you mean. It's one of those things where if you're next to 3 people acting like 9 or 10 out of 10 and you're doing a solid 7 or 8, the gap seems bigger when everyone is like literally top tier, and then you're like, yeah, you're doing a really good job. By comparison, it may seem maybe that does account to some of it. Obviously, I think a lot of the fandom is hate anyway, and they want to complain about everything. But I know a lot of people are still really enjoying her. It was just that was one of the main critiques I've heard from people whose opinions on Star Wars I trust about the show, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't think that at all. But
she's been a bit lumbered with some bad stuff as well, hasn't she? Like she had a weird parkour scene in episode 2, which went absolutely nowhere. And I think her as a character, they've not quite known what to do with. They know the general story where it's going, but I think the arc of the show is too long for what they need to do with her as a character. She's not got enough to do within the 6 episodes, unfortunately. So they have to keep creating situations for her to be in, or scenarios for her to be in. Her through line seems quicker than the arc for me. So I think that's also a problem, and that's clearly not the actress's fault. Nothing to do with her at all.
People feeling somewhat like, I think people when they went into this, they were like, we want loads of Kenobi and we want loads of Vader, and then I was like, oh, there's a young Leia as well. And it's like, okay, we've got Leia in it as well. Oh, and quite a lot of screen time is going to this Inquisitor, and you're like, okay. I thought it was going to be about Kenobi and Vader, so maybe that's part of it, because I've seen a few people critiquing saying this isn't the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, this is the show featuring Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's like that is a criticism I don't fully agree with, but I do see to a degree the point of like what people expected Kenobi to be on Tatooine for most of the series, if not all of it, whereas it's like, oh, actually a lot of it's about Leia, and then a lot of it's also about Reva as well. What do you think, Tonya?
I think it's unfair to say that it's featuring him. That was absolutely true with Boba Fett, where it's like,
Yes,
we have some
100%.
Boba Fett in the Boba Fett show?
Definitely, 100% agree there.
We're seeing character growth. We're seeing that he didn't start off exactly where he left off, and he didn't start off where he ends up. We're seeing a different character than we've seen him play, and we know that he has to change in order to get to be this other person. One of my fears is if we spend too much time with Kenobi and Leia, that their relationship, I guess I shouldn't say relationship, because we don't see them together in the main series. But what we know of their relationship, I don't want the dialogue to not make sense anymore. But at this point, what happens when they go to rescue her? She's like, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? And then he mentions Ben Kenobi, and she's like, Ben, let's go. Like, where is he? So you can see how she'd be excited to reunite with this person who helped her in this previous situation, someone she trusts and likes. I don't want them to screw that up. I don't want it to seem like, man, they were much better friends than the dialogue implies. Because there is that whole, you helped my father, but that could have just been coded dialogue so that if it got caught.
I think this will be it now, won't it? We had that lovely moment in this episode when she puts her hand onto Kenobi's and they share this like moment together. I think the next episode will be dropping her off, won't it? And that will be it. Do you think she's going to be in it all the way through?
I think she should go home. I really think she should, so it can return to being more Kenobi focused.
Drop her off now and then go off to the Rebel base, and that's what the next 2 episodes are about, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but
Well, we hope. Yeah, I agree completely. I think.
Sorry, Tonya, I don't mean to speak over you there. And now I'm doing it to Mike. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, everybody.
I've noticed. It's fine. I think, I agree with you guys. I don't think it is featuring the Kenobi show. I think he is front and center. I just think the other characters got screen time, and I'm happy with that. I'm intrigued by finding out more about the Inquisitors. I like knowing about this new character, Reva, and things. And I like seeing how characters squabble in the Inquisitors, which is not dissimilar to how in Legends how the Sith squabbled. When you've got people who are dark side and they basically, you do dirty tricks, you kill people, how you got to where you are, how you survive is by killing people. There's going to be like infighting in the ranks, whereas the Jedi is a lot more about peace. And it's basically like, look, we're all equal, apart from these 12 on the council, we're all equal, and the few that are masters. But that's respect. You get there in time, not you have to do a better job than him in this instant or I'm going to kill you. There's not the desperation in the Jedi, whereas in the Inquisitors and in the Sith there is. And I like seeing that element because I don't think we've seen much of that in the rest of Star Wars. Because obviously in the original trilogy there are no Inquisitors. It's just Palps and Vader, and for most of it it's just Vader.
And I'd like to see how Vader does away with all of them.
Yeah, because I know in the in Star Wars Rebels, I won't say which ones, but some do appear in Star Wars Rebels, and there are those in Star Wars Rebels who also do die, but it doesn't indicate, I think, in Rebels that they're all gone. And by Rebels, there's very heavy insinuation there are others. So it is that thing of what happened to them all. Maybe this is going to be something that's going to bleed into Mandalorian or something. Maybe there's going to be someone with Thrawn or something involved with that in the future that's going to be an ex-Inquisitor or something. Who knows?
Well, they heavily feature in the Darth Vader comics, don't they, as well?
Yes.
Which are between 4 and 5?
It's between 3 and 4 is the 2017 Vader comics.
Yeah.
It's set
And
like
they're in
just
those, aren't
after, just after Revenge of the Sith. You get introduced to the Grand Inquisitor in there, and some of the characters that are in this show and also in the Jedi Fallen Order game, they pop up as well. And there's 1 or 2 in Rebels that is in that, but there's like 20 years between, 15 years between Rebels and those Vader comics ish. So it's more towards the start of the Empire, but it's like kind of Reva says as well, which I quite like, which is when people have said, oh, why is Vader not just kill Obi-Wan? Why is he doing this? And I'm kind of like, to be fair, I know this is kind of a cop-out answer, but it's like, A, he's dramatic and he likes doing those things. He wants Obi-Wan to suffer. But B, after 10 years of hunting Jedi, the Inquisitors literally say, there's no Jedi left. There's nothing to do. It's like, can you imagine being Vader and after killing basically anyone who's even remotely challenging over years and then getting to fight your old master, you'd be like, I want to fight him again and again because without him, I'm just a slave to Palps, or I've got something to do with myself, if you know what I mean.
I think there's something emotional in him not killing him right away. He wants him to suffer. He's been suffering for years and blaming this suffering on Obi-Wan. So why would you get rid of him? Why would you end his suffering? No, he needs him alive so that he can continue to make him pay. He might eventually kill him, but he was never going to kill him the first time.
I 100% agree with that. I've seen a lot of criticism of that moment of the end of episode 3 where like, why didn't Vader finish off? He just stood there and watched him go. He could have done... He chose to let him go. Because
he's too important. He kills those who don't matter. Like, I'm done with you. I will throw you away. You're not going to throw away Obi-Wan.
It's torture, isn't it? It's like it's a slow, constant. I mean, he's just proved
that easily, you know.
Yeah, exactly. He's proved that at this point he can do whatever he wants, and Obi-Wan cannot do anything to stop him. So it's a cat and a mouse, isn't it? I'm going to let you go for a little while before I pull you back again. I'm going to keep doing that for as long as I want to.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. I've never found any parts of this show have misstepped with any characters in the sense of the way they're treating Vader, Leia, and Obi-Wan. And even Owen, all of them are just brilliantly done. You're like, this is, all the people involved, and Deborah Chow, who's directing it and things. It's like, you understand what makes the characters in Star Wars that we know and love. That's what Charles Soule especially does so expertly in the Vader comics and what he does with his other works. It's just when you get someone who really truly understands what makes the character tick, you can put them in situations and make it work. And I think that's what Kenobi is really a show of, is regardless of one's opinion of this specific episode and the kind of with, the coat and heart, yeah, whatever. Aside from that, it's like, we know what happens to the characters, or the vast majority of them. So the point is just delving deeper into their relationship, seeing something we haven't really managed to explore before. We saw the emotional end of episode 3, and then we saw the end in 4, but there's a lot in the middle that's, how are they feeling? And this show is, with the Leia stuff going above what I expected and beyond, but it's also kind of what I wanted. I just want to see how Vader and Obi-Wan were dealing with this time in between. I think the show has done a good job of that. And that interaction, I think, is some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen. And I'm very, I think everyone's fairly confident that they're going to interact again probably in the next 2. And it's like, I can't wait for it. Anything. I'll be happy with basically almost anything. As long as Vader doesn't yell no. That would really piss me off if he did that, if I'm honest with you. But I want to see that helmet come off properly. I want to see Anakin, Hayden Christensen talking to Kenobi. I want the helmet coming off. He looks so cool. We got to see him in the back to tank and stuff. I give it to me, please. I
agree with that completely, Mark. I think there is no suspense. There is no tension in this show in terms of where the narrative can take you, because yes, Vader, Leia, Obi-Wan, they're all going to survive because we know they're there later. So what they have to do is find a different way to tell a story. And the different way to tell a story, as you just said perfectly, is to build characters, to add to the lore, is to add to the legacy, is to deepen connections. And I think that's what's pulled Ewan McGregor back in. That's why he's a producer. because he wants to go back in and perhaps do something, as we know from what he has said himself, he felt like he didn't get to do enough when he originally portrayed this character in the prequels. You know, I like them enough. I don't like them as much as originals. I probably like them slightly more than the sequel trilogy now we've got to that point. But, you know, he himself has said, like, it wasn't quite what I hoped it was going to be. This is the chance, right? This is him getting to do it.
Completely agreed. Tonya?
I think they do have to do something to pull us in more emotionally because of exactly what he was saying. We know the outcome of all of the main characters. And I think that's where they're failing us, is that they haven't given us someone else to root for who's inevitable, like someone that we're going to be concerned with their well-being. We need that tension to carry us through emotionally. Like we have to invest in somebody whose failure is a possibility. And we already know who's going to win here.
I did wonder if that's what they were going to do with Tarla. I thought maybe she was going to buy it this episode. I thought she was going to get killed either by Reva or sacrifice herself in the escape so Obi-Wan and Leia can get away. And she's a really great character, and I've really enjoyed the actress's performance. But maybe that was something they could have done at Tonya, could have given us like a big emotional payoff in this episode. You know, and if we're echoing episode 4, well, Kenobi has to sacrifice himself to help Luke and Han and Leia and everyone escape from the Death Star. So maybe that's what we should have got here. We should have got a sense of self-sacrifice. That was the weakest part of this episode, unfortunately, was the last few moments, was the ships coming in. I can't remember the name. Mike, you'll be able to help me out here.
Well, I actually looked up
Snowspeeders.
Snowspeeders is the colloquial term, but there is an actual name, and I forgot to look it up, so I'm going to do that now because I should remember them, but I can't remember what they're called. It's like T11 or something.
So the speeders coming in, and the Jesus Machina save, and again, I know that Reva herself had a plan that was going on, but that whole kind of section was the weakest part. Whereas just that simple thing, as you were saying, Tonya, with a bit of emotional connection, could have bumped up a little bit more, maybe.
We were never worried that they weren't going to get out of there. We were never worried that one of them might die. And it was so bad that they had this idiotic escape. Come on, you can't walk out with the code. Be smart about it. Make us impressed. Like nothing was impressive in that ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because some things before had been really good. Sorry, Mark, you were about to tell us the name.
The T-47 Airspeeder. That's what they are. It's called Snowspeeder is the thing everyone calls it.
Like the colloquial term, yeah.
T-47 is the thing. But sorry, you were talking about the escape.
A pilot who died, it's like, I don't even remember. You know?
Yeah, I looked up. I was like, is he someone that maybe we saw from something else? No, he's just a pilot. I was like, could have maybe made him like, I don't know, I can't remember the canon if this happened, but like Wedge Antilles' dad or something. Like that'd be cool. If he was called something, I mean, Captain Antilles is already his own character who dies in episode 4 anyway, because Antilles, according to George, is a common name, which is like, no, you just messed up and called them both the same thing, and they're completely unrelated characters, because no other characters have shared any surnames that are unrelated. But regardless of that hand-wavy thing, it would have been cool if they were like a parent of someone, or involved in someone else. Maybe it's going to show they are, but yeah, it was just like, oh no, that guy died. That sucks, I guess. I don't even know what his name is. They've said it once or twice. Yeah. I also a question. Why didn't they just leave via... I know Deus Ex Machina, the Snowspeeder's coming down, but I'm like, they could have just done that, but they swim out. Why wouldn't they have just jumped off the side of the thing? I know it was quite high, but I'm like, could have kind of been a thing where they just run, people shooting at them, going crazy. They're like, we've got no option, we have to jump in the water. And then they get in the water and just stop swimming, people are shooting at them, and then a Snowspeeder comes down and gets them out that way, rather than being this kind of... It's like they succeeded when they really shouldn't have. Like watching, you look at Kenobi compared to any other Imperial who's ever lived on screen. You're like, he looks nothing like it. You've got a coat over a little bit, and you've got this big shaggy beard, and you're looking left and right with this lump next to you. You're like, how did you get that far with no one? You see a couple of people looking at them, but you're like, that Imperial officer questioned her, who's above his rank, because she wasn't in the area.
Exactly. You set this up that they are on top of their security, and then, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it didn't fit in with the own episodes, the rules the episode itself had put into itself. And I think that's the problem when you look under it more so. But I love the Inquisitors, the Inquisitorius place. It was called Fortress Inquisitorius. It's in the, I keep saying that word, it's making my brain spin. It's in the Jedi Fallen Order game. because the Inquisitors are quite heavily in that. But what do you think of that sort of with Obi-Wan going through it and all of his sort of scenes sneaking in? What do you guys think of that? Jack, if we go first.
I mean, the set design was phenomenal. It was like pure Star Wars, wasn't it? I mean, it is probably the silliest name they could have come up with. Fortress Inquisitorius. I mean, come on. They're not even trying there. But, the set design was great. And the moments of Obi-Wan starting to reconnect, I said before, I really enjoyed. And as I was watching with my partner, with Emma, she was like, he's doing it again. Why is he not in a disguise? Which I thought was really interesting, because in episode 2, when he was just walking around there.
Right. Everybody's looking for you. I know. Let me take off my hood.
But again, I had a little fix for it. I was doing a mic. I was channeling you, Mike. It was beautiful. So I didn't do it in the mic. We were watching the show, obviously. So when we got a chance to talk afterwards, I was like, I think I know. I think it's a little bit of that old Jedi arrogance coming back. And then maybe think about Phantom Menace of episode 1, when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are just strutting around the ship after the conference talks have gone wrong. It was, for me, that's what it felt like. I think the coat is a problem. I think that's poor writing. I think this earlier part, he could have put on a Stormtrooper outfit, and again, we'd echo episode 4 even more. But I think it was a conscious choice not to do that, because I'm a Jedi, I don't need to. So I think it was a little bit of that another sign of that coming back, that sense of Jedi. I said the word arrogance. That's not the right word, obviously, because that's potentially, that's potentially a negative trait. But it's that sense of like the old Obi-Wan's coming back a bit more.
Mm. What do you think about the sort of Obi-Wan part sneaking around inside the fortress, Tonya?
I know that they want to show his face because he's a great actor, but I do think that they need to do a smarter job of making it so that he is getting through and showing his face for good reasons, not just, we want to show his face. But I do like the way he's starting to get his power back and he's throwing off the stormtroopers. Like, he was being smart about that. They show him I think he's doing a great job of explaining with just facial expression what is going on inside of him. Like, just his nonverbal acting is spot on in this. Yeah,
I completely agree. I love seeing the Force powers come back. I think with the new canon, there's something that keeps coming up, which is people closing themselves off to the Force. It seems to be something I've not consumed enough Legends content to confirm if it happened much in Legends, but from what I understand, I don't think it happened that much in major stories. I think Legends was kind of the opposite. It was like, hey, Luke's getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and here's a Sith Lord that literally can eat a planet, and he's just, powers Starkiller, my favourite Legends story ever, one of my tattoos. Galen Merrick, the guy who Sam Witwer plays in the game Force Unleashed, he's one of the most powerful beings there are. He literally pulls a Star Destroyer down that's in the sky. It's like, that power is unfathomably strong, apart from, Palpatine's final form in the end of Rise of Skywalker. But like, with that kind of, with Legends, it was so over the top, and now in canon, it's kind of bringing it back a little bit. It's like, okay, here's loads of really powerful people, but they're cutting themselves off from the Force for different reasons. But I quite like seeing that. It's a good storytelling device, I think, for it to keep it interesting and do a bit more of a deep dive into what connection to the Force really means. Why the Jedi kind of had to, in certain ways, act the way they did. You need to really be centered. You need to be okay with the world around you. You have to be at one with yourself. And although the Jedi went too much with it in a lot of ways in their dogmatic thoughts, and part of them is the reason that Anakin turned, I think that the way it's showing is like they needed this kind of support system to help them. Having a Jedi being in the Order, you didn't have to think about food or jobs or credits or anything like that. And that's kind of shown in a lot of the other content I've been consuming recently, where it's like, when Jedi have to go off by themselves after Order 66, it's hard not being caught. But after a year or two, not being caught isn't the problem. What the problem is them trying not, as they put at the start of the series, trying not to help people, trying not to do all these things, and you're just kind of left as a shell, and you don't use them. Yeah, exactly. So I really like that element of him getting his Force powers back. I think it really is a good storytelling device to show where his character's going. Yeah.
Kenobi's makes perfect sense though, doesn't it? He's in hiding. His job is to watch out for Luke and make sure he grows up and potentially could be the next New Hope. And it's a bit like we see in X-Men sometimes. When X-Men go into hiding, they can't use their powers, right? Because otherwise they reveal where they are. And this is the same thing, isn't it? If Obi-Wan uses his powers, he's going to reveal where he is. So he's shutting himself off from the Force in order to stay hidden. He knows at the very least the Emperor's out there, and he didn't know Anakin had become Vader, but he must have known Sith was coming too, right? There'd be a new apprentice, and there's the Inquisitors, and so I think for his arc here,
being hunted.
Yeah, it's a perfectly sensible choice for him to do that.
Yeah, completely. And so with this, I want to mention as well, there's that moment where Kenobi goes into the tomb and he sees a lot of corpses. And that scene is very powerful. I was hoping we'd see a few more. I was kind of hoping and not hoping. I was like, oh, I want to see some Jedi. And I was like, actually, I don't want to see any. Because if I see any, that's going to be one less Jedi I get to find in a comic somewhere, a small-time Jedi that only I care about.
Perfect chance for a Samuel L. Jackson cameo though, right? That
would have been interesting if it had him without his hand in there, and then you'd be like, there you go, Mace Windu is actually dead. But I think they're going to bring it back at some point. Samuel Jackson's been talking about it so much since it happened. He's always been saying, no, I think he survived. And it's like, I don't necessarily want him to come back, but with what they did with Darth Maul, with what they've done with the Emperor, I think once they did that with the Emperor, I was like, okay, no one can die then. Whereas if they didn't do that, I'd have been a bit more like, okay, the Darth Maul thing was a really special circumstance I can kind of get on board with. Anything else is like, well, no one necessarily is going to die. So, well, he's going to come back at some point. So why don't we just, come on. I thought he might have come back in this, to be honest with you. But I'm still hoping he doesn't. I'm kind of hoping just for ages. I just don't want Mace Windu to come back. Because I'm like, once he does come back, he can't undo it. In a sense, he's kind of the last character. He's almost, in a very minor way, the Uncle Ben of this, because he's the catalyst of Anakin becoming Vader. And so once you bring him back, you're like, well, you took away Vader's redemption in Return of the Jedi. Not took away, I think it still works, but Palpatine surviving, I think, lessens the weight of the importance of it. But with the Mace Windu part, you're like, well, Mace Windu didn't die either. And you're like, well, so Anakin didn't really even kill anyone either. He didn't really... So I don't know. That was a ramble about Mace Windu. But what do you guys think of the tomb scene with the corpses? What are you, Tonya, if you want to go first?
I thought it was pleasantly morbid. Like it was...
Agreed.
It was visually compelling. I wasn't any more saddened by the child, though there was the question of, is that the child? But it's not the one who asked. But I don't see him being in there. But it was so brief that it wasn't really that big of a deal. I thought there were far more interesting things happening. It seemed like they were making it this huge thing, like it was going to be a piece of the Death Star or something. And no, it was just boom. I don't think that that's a big secret that should be kept. It was actually kind of disappointing that was the big thing that they were hiding.
It did seem odd. I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. Oh, it's quite harrowing. And then you're like, oh.
And then it's over.
Yeah, I thought they were going to see Quinlan Vos there. And I was like, please don't. I will cry. But I was like, please don't. I want Quinlan Vos to survive and have his own live action series. I don't care. Milk Star Wars all you want, Disney. Give me Quinlan Vos doing anything. But he wasn't. I was like, oh no, we're going to see Quinlan Vos dead. Oh, that would be horrendous. I was like, that would be...
a lot of build-up and then we're just out of it. And it didn't have anything to do with the rest of the episode anymore.
No.
So why were we there?
Yeah, it was... thinking about it, because I tried looking up stuff. I was like, oh, I wonder if any of these people were actual Jedi. And there's one character, the first person he saw, which was an Akosian, which is the species. And there's a Jedi Master called, it was Tira Sinube. When I saw him on screen, I was like, Sinube, I know that one. And he's in the Clone Wars. He's in an episode called Lightsaber Lost with Ahsoka. He's like really, really old Jedi. And it's like, I think they were kind of nodding, being like, unless he pops up alive in a comic somewhere, he's dead. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But he is such an incomprehensibly minor character. I was like, oh, it could have... It was dissonance I had. I wanted a Jedi to be there, but I also didn't, because I don't want someone I like to be there.
Right.
What about you, Jack? What do you think about that? And then sort of the interrogation scene as well? Because I heard what Tonya said about it slightly earlier, but I don't think I've heard your thoughts on the interrogation scene specific.
I think it's another great chance for McGregor to show off his face acting. I agree with what you said, Tonya. Like, there's so much going on in his wordless. I'm not trying to do an impression of him because I really couldn't. I'm just thinking what words I could find for it. But yeah, and his and his non-verbal acting, absolutely. I get your point. It doesn't really go anywhere. I think it's meant to be, my interpretation of it is meant to be another kind of kick on for Obi-Wan. like, oh shit, this is not, it's another like way for him to start finding his way back. I don't know quite what it's there for. Is it meant to be like each Inquisitor's first kill? Maybe they put them there as like is it meant to be the draining force from them? I don't know. It does feel like there needs to be more explanation and more reason for it. I think at this point in this episode, it's just meant to be, come on, Obi-Wan. Find your way back even more. Like here's another reason, as if Leia not being kidnapped is enough. Here's another reason why you need to get back in touch with the Force, because these people need to be stopped.
Maybe it will connect back to why she's even caring about finding Kenobi. Maybe it will come back, and they just didn't do a good job of connecting this episode.
There's an empty pod there ready for Kenobi with a little nameplate on.
She spent ages hand carving it. I think the tomb part was kind of meant to insinuate that if he didn't get to Leia in time, she'd just be another person in the tomb. It's kind of like it's like almost a room before the interrogation room. It's like, yeah, if people die in that chair from being interrogated and tortured too much, then they kind of end up in there. I think that's kind of what I got from it. But I was interested by the strange amber they were in. I was like, are these like, when I first saw them, I was like, are they trying to talk about clones? Are these people in like suspended animation? Are they just dead? It does seem peculiar to have the sworn enemies just dead left up there. Like not...
Like a museum.
Yeah, kind of. But you'd think with how brutal we see the Inquisitors are, and with fighting Jedi with lightsabers, you'd think people would be in pieces a bit more.
Exactly. That's why I don't think it was that kid, because I think he was just sliced and diced and there would be nothing to preserve.
Yeah, from the Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? Yeah, so I've got a couple of other mentions here. We've spoken about most of the story, I think.
We didn't get Jack's thoughts on the interrogation.
Oh, sorry, that might be me interrupting again. Go on, interrogation.
No, so the conversation was in a flow, and I then didn't want to interrupt you. I'm not sure I've got a lot to add, if I'm honest, but thank you for bringing it back, Tonya. Again, it's another showcase for the Leia actress, for what she can do. It's another growth for Leia in terms of, again, it gets an echo to episode 4, isn't it? We know Leia gets tortured in episode 4. I think it's what you said, Mike. It's another chance for us to see these subtle hints that she's always been a Force user, even though she's not been aware of it. Clearly, that's how she's blocking Reva, is by her own. I find it interesting that Reva's not commenting on this, that she's not feeding back to somebody, that she's not saying to Darth Vader, that little girl, she stopped me reading her mind, so she must have the Force. So yeah, I liked it, but also it's another thing you start thinking about too hard, you can start nitpicking some holes in it, I think.
I found it like, now that you say that, as an interesting perspective, but I would counter that by saying Reva's trying to show she's strong, and even if there is a 10-year-old who's strong with the Force, you wouldn't want to be like, this person's kind of besting me a little bit, because I just stabbed the Grand Inquisitor just to kind of get his job. If I'm saying this 10-year-old can overpower my mind, I can't remember what the term is, like going into someone's mind power, it would probably make her look bad. And she was still kind of in the midst of doing it, and then Tarla kind of interrupted.
Well, she'd taken Leia off for the interrogation chair at that point, hadn't she? She's sort of giving up on using the Force, and she was like, I'm going to torture you instead. Yeah,
that's a good point. Not quite Kylo Ren in that part, but then I suppose Kylo Ren can do it against Rey either. So
no,
can't do it against women. It seems that's the thing. The powerful Force women, they're the ones who can deflect the mind. They can't let the men intercept their mind. It's good imagery. So with this, I've got a couple of like random bits of trivia, not random, but there's a Tarla mentions Florum, which is a place that's in the Clone Wars, and one of my favorite characters ever, Hondo Onaka. He is first seen there in one of the episodes, Dooku Jedi Lost, and a Dooku Captured. Dooku Jedi Lost is an audio drama by Cavan Scott. Yeah, and that planet comes up quite a lot in the Clone Wars, which I quite liked. It's just one of those things where it's like, it means nothing to the majority of people, but when they just mention a planet in passing that's popped up before, A, it gives me a job to do, but also B, I'm just like, oh, I know that place. So I liked that element. But are there any, I think Vader's probably the last thing I'd say tackling on this part of the show. Obviously, he wasn't in as much as the last episode, but he did interact with Reva, and he did that. Seeing Vader Force choke anyone, it could happen every episode. I'd be more than happy to do it. It's one of the coolest ideas, I think, in in cinema history of just being like, this guy could choke someone without being there. And I'm like, genius. I don't know if Star Wars was the first film to ever have someone being choked by something they can't see because ghosts and horror films, etc. But I'm just like seeing this foreboding thing. Yeah. Just foreboding, near 7-foot guy in the breathing mask, black armor, doing that and watching someone. I like how in the newer films, because they do it in the sequels quite a lot, where because they've got so much more of a budget, they can make it more intense each time. Because in A New Hope, the first time, Vader is literally holding someone there. And then you get to see, people, grabbing at their throats and stuff. But when you see Kylo Ren do it,
you're like, I know that feeling.
Yeah. And when you get Kylo Ren do it, you do that. And then that guy's like dragged across the floor neck first to him and picked up. It's like every time you see a Force choke now, it's more extreme, which I quite like. And I like seeing him holding like Reva up in front of a couple of the Inquisitors and things.
Mm-hmm.
I visually, I think, as Jack said earlier in this, I just think this series has done so much right. Visually, musically, and obviously Tonya, you pointed out to me it was Natalie Holt that did the music, the soundtrack and things for it, apart from the Kenobi theme, which is done by John Williams. Yeah, kudos to her. The visual effects in this whole show, obviously the volume is a part to play. But I know that Kenobi, Ewan McGregor said so much that with the prequels of the blue screen, it was difficult because of, trying to imagine stuff. And I'm like, oh, it looks so good. It must have been so much fun to be there.
Yeah, the set is beautiful.
Yeah. They've got very talented people, haven't they? I mean, I think one of the things that I've noticed in this, like the measure of Star Wars is, you get, is it Joe Edgerton? You get him back.
Yes.
As Owen for like a couple of scenes. That's the measure of Star Wars. People want to come back. But I think you look at Deborah Chow and like her direction. Is it Chung Hoon Chung? I think Chung Hoon Chung is the cinematographer. And I wanted to look up who it was because I was just like, some of these things just look so good. And then you look at what he's done, and he's worked with Edgar Wright. He's worked with Park Chan-wook. I mean, okay, that's why this guy's so good, because look at the people he's collaborated with before. So, yeah, I think stylistically, I love The Mandalorian, but this easily is the best looking Star Wars show yet.
Completely agree.
Maybe because we're spending so much time with the Imperials. Like, their stuff just looks the best. With all the right colors, it's shiny, it's clean. They get to shower. They're not on a desert planet.
I do. I'm still really, really enjoying the show. Like this episode, I didn't think was bad at all. I think it was definitely the worst, I'd say, of the three. But I think that it's just one of those things where I said kind of earlier on, this is the part of the film that's just the least interesting part of the movie. But because it's a series, we're obviously intentionally in this conversation, we're focusing on it, and because it's week by week, it's just obviously, as Tonya said, there should be something a bit more in there. And I feel like the Kenobi parts with his force power, and like he killed a lot of stormtroopers, and I loved the bit in the hallway where he's just deflecting lightsaber bolts, blaster bolts. Yeah, it was so cool, and it's just like, this is what I want to see. I want to see high budget, a huge amount of effort put into the choreography and the fighting style, and really cool stuff happening. And I was like, the original trilogy is incredible in so many ways, but that is the one part it's lacking a bit compared to some of the other Star Wars content we've had. Especially in episode 4. Yeah, especially in episode 4. And then you get like Christopher Lee come out in like episode 2 and be incredible because he can do like fencing and stuff. It's like, even
he's
then.
so elegant.
Yeah, and I love his lightsaber hilt. But what do you, before we wrap up, obviously, and before we plug our other content and things, what are your kind of final thoughts on this episode as a whole and what you want from the show going forward? If we start with Tonya.
Well, you mentioned that this episode wasn't bad, and I don't think it was bad. I just think that because the last 3 built, it was building, and we were going up, and we're on the roller coaster, and this one just dropped.
Yeah. And
because the last one was so high, it feels like this one is bad in comparison, but it's not a bad episode. It's just not nearly as good as the last one. And I think they set themselves up for failure they should have continued to build. And usually it's the 3rd episode, isn't it? That's like, all right, we have to get ready for the 3rd one to be the snoozer, and then it'll start getting good again. So because we didn't have that situation, it was like, maybe it's going to be good all the way through, But then they have these silly moments that didn't need to be there. They had good material for this, and it could have been amazing, and it wasn't. So I'm disappointed in that. So not bad, but it was disappointing compared to where it seemed like we were leading. Still plenty of room for them to show us a fantastic finish. I think we do need to let it be more about Kenobi and Reva now, because we've introduced this new character. We need to see how she goes away, because she doesn't make it into the movies. And the relationship between Leia and Kenobi needs to be brief. It can't be the entire series, because then they should feel a lot more important to each other in A New Hope. Or we need to see how he gets back to Luke and how Luke is the one that he's been watching. Maybe Reva will figure out about the kids. Maybe she will figure something out and Kenobi has to kill her to keep her quiet.
Oh, that would be
to
good.
Protect the kids. And that's how he gets his full mojo back and keeps Kenobi's presence. You know, he keeps his presence a secret on Tatooine. So that is what I am hoping will happen. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, that's nice. I think, Tonya, right at the start, you described this episode as being a bit flat, and I think that's the best way to describe it. I think, and to paraphrase myself, like I enjoyed it in the moment, and it was fast-paced, and things were just happening, and I was enjoying it, and then afterwards I started thinking like, oh, this and all that. So, yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's good, but previously it's been great. I think there's some really nice moments and nice touches. I really like it when Tarla gets taken away by the Imperial, and she goes behind the wall, and the next thing you know, she's strangling the guy and breaking his neck. And she's like, oh, sorry, just a little moment there, Ben, I'm back. But then equally, slightly before, when she's on the radio to Kenobi and the guy looks over at her and then doesn't do anything about it, that was a bit silly. So it was an episode of like good stuff matched with some silly stuff. And it didn't quite strike the balance right. And even right, Mike, you said that last moment with Vader, the choke in Reva was great, but then just immediately going, oh, all right then. Felt a little bit un-Vaderish.
Yeah.
But like, you know, excusing her for letting them get away. He's never given anybody that chance ever before. Even though it's later. So it's not like he's learned a lesson, because we know in episode 4, he's just choking out senior members of the Imperials and killing them, and for one small mistake. So I'm not sure that quite tallied, but it's that sort of episode. This is really good, but all that. And this is great, but that. I think predictions, I like that. So I know I've not thought about that idea of like Obi-Wan's going to be the one to end Reva. That would be a really nice circle is now complete, wouldn't it, as well? If Obi-Wan brought her to the academy and then he's one who has to end her. Just got another little quote in there for you, Mike. I hope you like that.
He'd be conflicted once he finds out that he hurt her and threw her on his path. But he has to be the one to end her to protect those kids.
Which is another echo of Anakin as well, isn't it? Which should be really interesting. There's one person I would love to see in this show. We won't, but as a big Buffy fan, if we could get a Sarah Michelle Gellar live action cameo, that would be...
Oh, is the fourth sister or third sister?
Amazing. So, you know, she's in the family. Rebels is canon. So if we could get Sarah Michelle Gellar pop up, maybe that could be the little end of season 6 thing for Obi-Wan Kenobi season 2. She becomes Inquisitor, who's now, I don't know, that's just pure dream. Like, your dream is for these things to happen, Mike, and to interview certain people and for this to come into the shows. This is mine. I want my Sarah Michelle Gellar in Star Wars.
Oh, that would be incredible. The fact that she did the voice acting for one of the sisters in Rebels was incredible, and I'm just like,
she was the main Inquisitor, wasn't she, in season 1?
Yeah, she was a major character of the Inquisitors. It was her and the guy who's now the third brother, I think it is.
Yeah, Sung Hang from Fast and Furious, isn't it?
Yeah. He's in Rebels a lot as well, and it is interesting that they chose a different sister. They chose a different Inquisitor woman, because I said, I think on the last episode, I looked it up, and she's only appeared once before in one of Tales of Vader's Castle, a Cavan Scott comic. That's just this. Even I haven't read that yet. It's IDW publishing, so it's like, you could have chosen her. Why not? Are you gonna, or are they saving them? Because it's that thing where they've announced there's going to be another Jedi Fallen Order game, and some of the Inquisitors are, well, in Jedi Fallen Order, the main baddies are the Inquisitors. They're the people you fight. So I wonder if maybe they're saving her for that or something. But I don't know. That would be great. I would love. I didn't even think about that. With me, I agree with everything you guys have said about the episode. It's good. Could be better. And I think the most frustrating thing is the fact that, as you've said, it's not like a time travel movie like Endgame where you could pick holes in the plot because of how complicated it is. It's the issues in this episode are actually quite fixable. and it's a bit frustrating. And I think that's one of the things that so many people, including myself, was disappointed with the end of, for example, Game of Thrones on a much larger scale. Is like, there's all these bits, and you're like, if you just spent an extra few hours looking into this thing, you could have probably done something slightly different that would have had no impact on the plot, but it would have not been as jarring. I think that's the frustrating part of this episode, more so. Where, yeah, as you guys have pointed out, I mean, if the three of us can figure out all these things, like immediately after watching the episode once, it's like, the writers maybe should have figured that out. But that's wonderful. Predictions. Yeah, I think Vader's going to... everything you said is probably better than anything I could predict, but I'm just holding out for that Vader Obi-Wan showdown. I'd like to see Quinlan Vos in live action, but there's certain rumours going around, which I don't know how much I trust, of there being another series of Kenobi that because it's been so successful, and I'm like, do I want that? Do I not? I don't want them to, not have the finished product that they should have and kind of string it along. I would rather be, here's the finished thing completely untouched, and then we might make something else, but I don't want it to be Kenobi. I'd like to see a Vader or an Inquisitor show. I would be like, look, I love Kenobi, but from what we understand, he didn't really do much between episodes 3 and 4. We can't just have him constantly out on adventures. That takes away from what he's kind of been doing. And then, so I'm just like, I don't know, or are they going to just make him go against Vader again? And it's like, every interaction they have takes away a smidge from their interaction in episode 4. So I'm like, one big interaction, Obi-Wan bests him. I said in the last couple of episodes of my dream, so Obi-Wan and him have some sort of force power battle, and Obi-Wan strips his armor off. Love it. That would kind of... And
you get to see him, which is what you're asking. You would like to see his face.
And him like yelling at Obi-Wan, being like, look what you've done to me. Kill me. Finish the job. And Obi-Wan's like, no.
There must be a reason why you get... They can't just be for like snippets here and there. They can't be for like Hayden Christensen looking like a zombie in the background, or like he's wearing a swimming cap in a Bacta tank. I hated that bit at the start of this episode. I like the Force connection, but the makeup was atrocious on Hayden Christensen for that scene. There must be a reason why he needs to be back. He has to reclaim his place. I liked what you guys said in an earlier episode within the fandom, and for him as a person, I think that's important. But his face has to be in here somewhere, and that's a brilliant way to do it, Mike.
That's what I'd love. That or a big flashback with, but that's what I'm worried about. They're going to do a second series, and that's all going to be like flashbacks. There's going to be live action stuff for the Clone Wars. And I'll say about that what I said about when they announced the Kenobi show and when I knew he'd have a fight with Darth Vader. For me, when you first hear it, I go, that doesn't really work in the canon. But would I rather have something that doesn't fully fit in the canon, that makes one line of dialogue a smidge different, but still get loads more Star Wars content about characters I love, or not? And I'm like, to be honest, there's no Star Wars content I've consumed that I actively dislike. The Clone Wars movie is pretty close, and a few episodes of the Clone Wars are pretty weak. But aside from that, it's like the rest of it, even the worst comic I've read, I'm still glad I read it. So even if everything doesn't fit properly, I'd like them to at least make an effort. I think that's what I want. I need them to try and make something work for the Kenobi Vader line, when you left me, I was but a learner, but now I am the master. Try to do something to kind of make sense of that. Don't just ignore it. But if they don't land it properly, it's not the end of the world for me. I'm still...
It's a pretty important line, though. So you're making it sound like, one little line, like Leia saying she remembers her mother, and they changed this backstory, so that doesn't make sense. But that line between Vader and Obi-Wan is huge, and I think it's far more significant, and they need to absolutely make that matter.
Yeah, I think they do, but I'm not in the camp with some people who be an extreme, which is like, because acting as if they don't do that perfectly, the show's not worth it. That's kind of the part I'm getting at, which is like, it is an important line, but I'm with Star Wars, I'm an apologist as well, because here's the thing, which this is the biggest cop-out. This is more of a cop-out than the Force, okay? Not everything every person says to someone in the moment is always right. So even if it comes down to the point where Vader said that, and it didn't really make a lot of sense, but we still get a couple of seasons of amazing Kenobi, although there will be that part of me that's like, you should have done that. Like I felt in this episode, you should have done this differently. The Leia part, with that line.
The line every time you rewatch it. It's like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
They rob that moment. They rob that happiness,
I would rather they didn't, but I never find it robs anything. I just find, I'm like, yep, I still love this moment. It does take away a smidge, as it did, I said, for the Vader sacrifice in episode 6. I think episode 9 takes away from that to a degree. Even though the importance is still there, because if Vader hadn't done that, then the whole stuff with Rey wouldn't have happened, and therefore the air quotes true destruction of the Sith wouldn't have occurred until 20 years they decide to do some more. But at the present, so I know what you're saying, and I do agree in general. I do really want it all to fit together. I love it when the canon fits together. It makes me so happy because it's such a massively interconnected story, and there's so much other content that goes into it. And obviously there's so many fans, including myself, that know so many of the lines of dialogue. You don't want anything to be missed. You don't want things to not fit because someone did something lazily, or because the problem is when Disney are like milking it and they do something regardless of the canon. They go, well, we're just going to do this because we think this is cool and this is worth more to us than the true canon. So I completely get that, and I do share that. But there is also that part of me, in truth, that is, I'd rather have, this is controversial, I'd rather have loads of Star Wars content and only half of it be really good and work than have none of it, if you know what I mean. You know, it's like the prequels. I'm happy for I'm happy to deal with Phantom Menace because we got Revenge of the Sith. That for me is a fine balancing act. And I think for Star Wars, I've become such an apologist for it because I'm so forgiving of so many parts, because there's still so much of even Book of Boba Fett.
Pre-forgiving. They haven't even ruined the line yet, and you're already pre-forgiving.
Yeah, I'm preparing. Well, the thing is, with the amount of hate I've seen online, I'm just like, it doesn't matter what they do, is it? They could do the thing I said, and people would still be like, no, that don't work. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I'm somewhere in the middle. I just don't understand why people can't just enjoy it. I know we sit and I've picked out things I haven't enjoyed about this episode and about shows and Boba Fett, but I'm still glad it exists, and still glad I'm still watching Star Wars stuff. I'm still glad that 10-year-old me that discovered that movie, or I think I was even younger, and that has loved it my whole life, is getting more content, and now my son is getting it, and then my next son will get it, and it's amazing. So just enjoy it and accept that nothing is ever going to be flawless unless it's Die Hard.
Are you including all 5 Die Hard movies, or just the first?
No, just not. Because the rest of it has a lot of problems, but just that first one.
Well, there are perfect movies, but I'm not sure there's any perfect series. There's some series which I would consider that are phenomenal, but I don't think there's any series that exist that don't have a single bad episode. Of
course not.
You know, or even a bad moment, and I think that's the thing with the series format. I think that's part of the problem with not having this as a movie, even though I prefer series in a lot of ways. I think that is the problem, especially with the horrible and highly critical Star Wars fans in a lot of ways. I want to clarify, I'm not saying you are for criticising that line, for full clarity. That is a valid criticism. I'm talking about people online who just hate, no matter what Disney release, they're just going to hate it on it. They live to hate it. They're not even real fans because they don't actually enjoy any of Star Wars, it seems. But yeah, I'm with Jack. I just want more. I like to criticise Star Wars to a smidge, but I'm just like, yeah, just give it IV drip, just put it straight into my veins. I'll take it. Almost.
We're still doing this in 30 years' time, Mike. I'm going to be a happy 70-year-old.
Yeah, so will I. I also want Qui-Gon to push up as well.
You won't be 70, but I appreciate the sentiment.
Mm-hmm. So we will wrap up now then. So we've got Tonya. Do you want to tell people what you're up to, what you can tell us all about, and then we'll get Jack to do it and we can wrap up.
What I'm up to. I am currently working on a banned books project that will come out in September, and I have recruited some of the Comics in Motion crew to help me with this. Jack is going to be on the 1984 crew. You can find me across social media at Ms. Tonya Todd. That's MSTONYATODD. My website is MsTonyaTodd.com, and you can find me on IMDb under just Tonya Todd. I'll be on a few different episodes of Comics in Motion coming up, because right before I was here, I was talking Ms. Marvel with Rhea. We've decided that her next show is going to be Rhea Rants.
Amazing.
It's right there in the making. She loves alliteration. And
what do you mean next show? That's every show.
No, it's going to be called.
And I say that with love.
All love for Rhea. She's amazing.
100%. You are doing a lot of different things, and I'll try and include links in the description. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with Comics in Motion with Tonya Todd, and doing loads of other things. So yeah,
that's another thing you do, Mike. You put links on your program so that people can follow up on these things, and I love that, because I'll listen to something that someone's talking about, and you're like, oh, I'll put a link to that book or the show that is referenced in the middle of their conversation. If I'm driving, I can't look that stuff up, and then I know I can just look it up later. Mike has the link there. I don't have to remember the name of the book. You've handled it.
Yeah, I do have to try and make notes about it, because sometimes I do. I have forgotten once or twice. I'm like, crap. Like a few days later, I'm like, I forgot to put that link in. Let's not make a big deal about it. Let's pretend I always did. But Jack, please tell people what you're up to and where they can find you.
Well, I'm obviously a part of this wonderful Comics in Motion family as well. Regularly on with Tony doing season's greetings. And as you just said, Mike, no show is perfect. And that's part of what we do is we rewatch the show and discuss how well it holds up, however many years later since it first aired. And then I also feature on his Indie Comics Spotlight show more infrequently now because, of course, I've been pulled into this world, so I had to start my own podcast. So now we have Back to the Filmography, where I'm currently watching all of Jason Statham's movies. The lovely Tonya has already appeared. You are scheduled at a few points in the future, coming up quite soon. Actually, you are. Mike.
Yeah, I think August it's coming soon. Is the name of the film? Am I allowed to say the name of the film?
Of course you are. Yeah,
it's Collateral, isn't it? That's what I think I agree to. I've never heard of that film, and I looked it up, and I was like, "Is Jason Statham even in this?" It's like I saw the IMDb credit and the cast. I was like, "There's like 6 or 7 major actors, like Tom Cruise, Morgan Freeman, and a couple of others." And I was like, "I've never heard of this film. It's quite well rated, and Statham's in it." I'm like, I'm really excited to watch this. It's just a way to make Megan watch a movie.
Have you still not seen it?
Yeah, no, I've not.
Then I'm going to say nothing at this point about Statham's role in the film. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, that one, in terms of within his filmography, where he's at in terms of his growing star power, and where this fits is going to be really interesting.
I have to watch it so that I can listen to the conversation without spoilers.
Excellent.
Well, one of the things is with your show Back to Filmography, I've been listening to every episode. I recommend people, because some people, when they listen to reviews of movies, a lot of time they try and watch it to be, they hold off on watching listening to a podcast because they haven't watched the movie. And there's certain times I do that when there's a film I know I want to watch. Like I haven't listened to people's reviews, on Tenet because I'm kind of still on the fence if I'm ever going to watch it, but I might, so I'm not going to get it spoiled for me kind of yet. But with Back to Filmography, I really like the way you yourselves talk about it and you focus on Statham more so. And you do spoil the films to a degree, but I wouldn't call it spoiling because some of the films you talk about, it's like, I've seen Snatch and Lock, Stock, and the way you talk about it, I remember certain elements, but if I hadn't, I'd be like, oh, I want to watch that film. I heard you talk about, Ghost on Mars. I still don't really fully know what happens. I know it's horror and who survives and things, but aside from that, I'm like, I don't really know. I just loved hearing you talk about it. So I'd really encourage people to check out the show because it's really fun to listen to, even if you hadn't seen the movies. And when you have, it's even better. I love your hyper focusing on the Stath. And I said in Discord, and I'm going to say it recorded, so it's going to try and pressure you into it, is you should do Stath stats, where you should accumulate how many times, because you mentioned in Ghost on Mars, I think, his first kiss, and slightly spoilers, his first death. So it's like these kind of things. What I want to know these as you go through the filmography. So I'm putting that pressure on you now, recorded on the Comics in Motion feed. Please try and do that. You love a list.
I like lists too, so I second that.
I will let you know. The list has already started since I got home.
I can't wait.
I'm on it. The spreadsheet has been started, mate.
The state spreadsheet.
This is the hot talk. Everyone's here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for coming on the show. You can find, all our lovely listeners can find us, various places on the Comics in Motion feed. Follow Comics in Motion at Comics in Motion P anywhere on social media. You can follow myself at Genuine Chit-Chat on those various social media places as well. Obviously, you can listen to my show, Star Wars Comics in Canon. If you're listening to this, you should really also be listening to every single episode of Star Wars Comics in Canon. Chris, if you're listening, that means you, because you never have to have read a Star Wars comic in your entire life. You can just listen to the episodes. I go through the plot details, and I give all the details of you would need to follow the plot, so you have an understanding of what's going on in the canon, with lots of trivia and connected tissue as well. Lots of fun things. It's a great way to enter the Star Wars canon and learn a lot more than your friends, because I know everyone always talks about Star Wars when they're with their friends. I do, because that's what I start with the conversations on it. So do that, brag to your friends. You can tell people you know who Max Rebo is, that sort of fun stuff. But there's my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat. Speak to lots and lots of lovely people like Tonya, like JAC, like Alison Shelton, who's been popping up on the Comics in Motion feed as well. And I've got other interesting people and people involved with Star Wars.
You did the Miss Marvel episode with us.
Exactly. And I'm going to be on the Miss Marvel show as well. So Tonya's on the Miss Marvel show. Rhea's on the Miss Marvel show. Alison's on. Jack's pointing to himself. He's on the show. He's going to be on the show as well. It's episode 2, you say? Wonderful. So, loads of us are going to be on the show. It's great fun. Subscribe to Comics in Motion wherever you listen to podcasts, and everyone have a good time. So thank you as always for listening. We will talk to you all next week with the penultimate episode, where I think Dave is joining me on that discussion. And as always, friends, may the Force be with you.